Hi guys, Reading Adam here. Today is a quick video on a point or a note about speed reading as opposed to or in opposition to slow reading. The gist of it is that speed reading is very helpful, and the technique that I use is ripped from Tim Ferriss's book 4-Hour Work Week. When I flipped through his book, I first noticed it in a Borders, may they rest in peace, Borders bookstore, and I saw the book. The title is obviously intriguing. Who wouldn't want a 4-hour work week? And so I opened it up. I'm just flipping through it randomly. Let's see if my hand motions can, I don't know, that won't make a big difference. So I'm flipping through this book, and I briefly come across this just kind of sandwiched. It was this section sandwiched in between whatever he was talking about. It was a tangent, really. Like, oh, here's how you speed. By the way, here's how you speed read. And I had never actually seen anything on speed reading before. I never thought to Google it. I just assumed in my mind it was something that some people were good at doing, some people just did naturally. I didn't really know what it was about. So his version of speed reading is quite simple. If you have, let's see if I can describe it real quick. If you're looking at a paragraph, paragraphs are made up of lines, right? So you have one line of text and then another line of text and another line of text, and that's the body of text that you have. So within this line, you look at a word that's partly in the line, and then you look at another word that's a little bit farther in the line, and then you go down to the next line, look at a word that's partly in the line, and then a little bit farther down, and so on and so forth. When you look at that word, you use your peripheral vision to see the other words. So you're just looking at the words, and what you'll realize is you know what the words are without needing to say them, without having to sub-vocalize them. Have you ever thought about something and it just occurs to you, or you're thinking about something that's just in your head, and you just know it, even though you haven't actually thought the words. This can happen a lot, where you're thinking, you're doing thinking, you're processing, and then all of a sudden, and you're like, okay, I've got it, but you can't explain it in words because that requires slowing down your thought process and being a bit more thorough with the thinking. But in general, when you just look at a word and you can see on the periphery words around it, don't sub-vocalize it, which is when you're reading words in your head. That's sub-vocalization. And you practice moving, two eye movements, looking at one thing and then looking at the next, looking at one thing and then looking at the next, looking at one thing, next, one thing, next, one thing, next, one thing, next, and so on and so forth until you're basically reading that way the whole time. Now, what this did for me is my comprehension remained the same, but my reading was 3 times faster. So I used to read 20 pages an hour. 20 pages an hour. With this speed reading technique, I read 60 pages an hour. Okay? So, big difference. Suddenly you can read 3 times as much. However, it's difficult to keep it up. It requires practice. You have to really make yourself do it and maintain it. So it's not something that you start doing and then it's automatic. You have to continually work at it. Because many times I just kind of slip back into 20 pages an hour and just slow reading. Sometimes I want to read slow. Sometimes I want to sub-vocalize the words. It's not like sub-vocalization is bad or evil. sometimes what you're reading is difficult, or it's heavy, or it contains a lot of big words. And if you speed read it, you'll be lost before you know it. So some classics that I read, I'm not going to speed read them because I would quickly get lost, and it's a complicated enough story and plot and characters where I don't want to get lost. So that's danger with speed reading. There are some books that you can speed read to your heart's content, and you're probably not going to miss anything. I mean, most self-help books are this way. Lots of nonfiction is this way, unless it's philosophy, or unless you need to like talk or speak on that subject and you have to slow down and really take notes and study it. Tons of reading can be done super fast. If you catch yourself reading articles online, like, you might as well speed read stuff like that. Unless you're doing research for a paper, there's a better, higher purpose for it. Otherwise, just speed read your way through a lot of smaller, shorter material, anything that's paperwork, anything that doesn't require deep focus. Feel free to speed read and don't worry about it. I only ever slow down on stuff that's actually quite challenging material. And you'll know for yourself what challenging material is. Some novels you can speed read through and you're not going to miss what's going on. Like, for instance, one book that I sped read recently was American Gods. It's not the kind of story that I need to read too much into it. I don't need to pay as close attention to it. Even another book recently by Cormac McCarthy, I read No Country for Old Men. And in that book, it's almost like it's written, I've read before that it's almost like the book was written to be skimmed and leave you with an impression. And so I thought, well, let me put that to the test. Let me just speed read it. And it did seem to be the case that just by speed reading, by skimming, I was able to still get everything I needed to from the story. I still enjoyed it. I think it fell apart at the end, but I still enjoyed it, and I wouldn't have been any better off taking my time with it. So you're going to have to choose for yourself. What books are you going to take your time with? What books are you going to speed read? But speed reading itself is not a bad thing. Most of the time, if you're doing it properly, like meaning you're actually focused on your speed reading. Sometimes you'll even be more focused doing speed reading than you would be with slow reading. Slow reading does not mean you're focused anymore. So there you go. Feel free to speed read. Sometimes it might increase your comprehension because you actually have to focus on it. You'll have more energy. You'll feel better about yourself because you'll feel like you'll feel an elation. You'll feel like I can read so much more. That's how I felt when I first learned the technique. And try it out. Try different techniques. See which one works best for you. I don't particularly care for the techniques where, like, you stare at a line and then you're trying to absorb multiple lines at once, and then you move down and try to absorb multiple lines. I don't find that very helpful. I have to do the two eyeballs, like two snapshots per line. That works best for me. A different technique might work better for you. Some people, I'm sure, read way faster than 60 pages an hour. I find that to be a decent goal for myself. And if I can read an hour or 2 hours a day, like, I'm making pretty good progress through whatever books I'm reading at the time. So, again, speed reading and slow reading, very useful tools. Know when to use which and how to do it. Find a technique that works for you. Slow reading, keep in mind, doesn't always mean you're paying better attention. It's very easy to daydream, fantasize, or think about something else while you're slow reading, and you want to catch yourself from being able to do that. One weird thing I noticed about speed reading when you're not subvocalizing. So essentially, you're almost like in a meditative state where nothing is going on in your head. You're just absorbing. You're just observing this book you're reading. I've noticed that when I'm properly speed reading, I can carry on a conversation with somebody at the same time that I'm reading. And it's weird. It's weird. It's not like I'm this super genius, high IQ, and have multiple thought streams going on at once. Not that. But I can fully observe and absorb what I'm getting from a book, and at the same time fully observe and absorb and then communicate with my wife or whoever. So I found that to be kind of odd, but it was cool. It was very cool. It made me feel much smarter than I most likely am. But try it out. Check it out for yourself. See if you experience the same phenomena. I don't know what that phenomena is, if there's a name for it. But go ahead and absorb these points I have about speed reading or slow reading. Go ahead and use the technique from Tim Ferriss. Look up his book, 4-Hour Workweek, which, I'll have to do a post. I'll have to do a video on that sometime because I read that years ago. It's harder to do videos on books I've read a long time ago, but it's an interesting exercise because there's a lot of things that you forget, and then you realize you really have to go back to material, and depending on the material that it is that you're going back to is going to really change up what you get from it. With your cursory reading through it, you'll get A, B, C from it, and you'll miss X, Y, Z, but the next time you go through it, you get X, Y, Z. And ABC, you may solidify that, but you get X, Y, Z. And then maybe there's LMN that's in there as well, and you start to see that. Some books that work, some books you can do that. Most books are not quite that way. I think the only books I've actually really reread are some Michael Crichton books, because he was my favorite author as a teenager and a young adult. He was the only fictional author I would read pretty much. So I reread Jurassic Park. I reread Sphere. I didn't realize until the second time I read through Sphere, at the very, very end, one of the characters remarks to the female. So one of the males who survived remarks to the female who survived how pretty she looked. And I was like, oh my God. I realized that they had all decided to forget this power they had. They absorbed this power from the Sphere of changing reality with their mind or whatever. And they decided to all just kind of forget the power. But this female character, when he tells her she looks beautiful, because she wasn't supposed to be a beautiful person, you realize she became beautiful through this power. She made her looks better. And when he remarks on how pretty she looked, you realize he forgot about the power, but she kept it. She kept it. So I thought that was interesting. I didn't get that the first time I read the book, but the second time I read it, I understood that. And sometimes you miss obvious things like that. So rereading can be useful. I haven't done it very much because when you read so many books, and there are so many books to read, it's difficult to reread an entire book to justify the time to do that. So anyway, I don't want to make this too much longer. This is basically about speed reading, and do it. I advise it. I recommend it highly, and I'll try to leave a link below to one of the techniques for speed reading. Okay, bye for now. Thanks for watching this video. Subscribe, like the video, share the video, leave a comment, and talk to you next time.